Obi-Wan stands at the top of the dark, swirling chasm of Utapau, the weight of his thoughts heavy as the gravity around him. The vastness of the galaxy, teetering on the brink of chaos, fills him with an undeniable urgency. He dedicated his life to the Jedi Code, claiming that its tenets were correct, and a lifeline amidst the storm of war in the galaxy. Discipline, restraint, and adherence to the Jedi teachings were his guiding light, illuminating the path towards peace. And yet, the shadows of doubt creep closer with every moment. Anakin, we must stay true to the code, Obi-Wan insists, his voice steady yet laced with concern. It's the only way we can bring balance and restore peace. Emotions, attachments, they lead to nothing but chaos. Remember, a Jedi's strength flows from the Force, not from personal desires, he says on a hologram call with his old apprentice. Anakin Skywalker, still young and brimming with uncontained energy, shoots his mentor a look that could slice through steel. He feels the rules binding him like chains, stifling his true potential. Master, you're too rigid, Anakin retorts, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. The galaxy isn't black and white. We need to adapt, to feel. Emotions are part of being alive. Why should we suppress them? Obi-Wan sighs, knowing that this argument is far from over. He could sense the turmoil within Anakin, a tempest brewing, and it frightens him. Your feelings cloud your judgment, Obi-Wan says firmly. We're Jedi. Our path is clear. Then, in the background of Obi-Wan's call, he sees a familiar face pop in. Oh, Anakin, I'm sorry to disturb you, he says, the familiar figure of Palpatine looming in the background, watching them with a knowing smile. Not a problem at all, Chancellor, he says. I was just speaking with Master Obi-Wan. Palpatine recognizes the tension between the two, the silent rift growing with each exchange. To him, this was an opportunity, a crack in the armor of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan, Palpatine muses, stepping forward with feigned reverence. Your dedication to the Jedi teachings is commendable, but perhaps in these turbulent times a more flexible approach could yield greater results. After all, the old ways may no longer serve us well. Obi-Wan looks towards Palpatine. What do you mean? In this moment, Palpatine knows that this could be the opportunity of a lifetime to manipulate a master and an apprentice to the dark side and start his reign of terror in the galaxy with more powerful Force users on his side. Have you ever wondered what would have happened if Palpatine had manipulated both Anakin and Obi-Wan during Revenge of the Sith? Well, if you have, then this video is for you, because that's exactly the topic that we'll be exploring. So, buckle in, grab your giant bowl of bantha stew, and get ready as we go on this wild adventure through our next video, What If Palpatine Manipulated Obi-Wan as well as Anakin? If you like what you see today, please remember to hit subscribe and that like button as well, as every little ounce of support helps us to continue making this Star Wars content. Now, let's get right into today's video. In that moment, as Obi-Wan stands on Utapau, hearing what Palpatine is saying, he feels a flicker of uncertainty, but he quickly buries it. The Jedi Code has served us for millennia, Chancellor. It's not our place to question it. As he turns back to Anakin, he can see an eager glint in his eyes, a dangerous thirst for freedom that could not be quelled easily. Anakin, remember our purpose, Obi-Wan continues, hoping to steer the conversation back to safer ground. We fight for peace, not for personal gain. But Obi-Wan could tell that Anakin was already lost in the thoughts of what lay ahead. As Obi-Wan turns off his call, Palpatine's smile widens. The seeds of doubt had been planted in the Jedi Master, and soon they would bloom into something far more dangerous than either Jedi could foresee. The Clone Wars rage across the galaxy, a tumultuous tide that washes over countless worlds, leaving destruction in its wake. Obi-Wan Kenobi finds himself leading troops into battle, steadfastly adhering to the Jedi Council's directives. Each command is a weight on his shoulders, an obligation to uphold the ideals of the Jedi Order. Yet, the more he fought, the more he begins to see cracks in their approach. A system struggling under the pressure of war, and a council that continued to act more and more hypocritical. Remember, we must act with restraint, Obi-Wan says, addressing the 212th before their next offensive on a desolate planet. The Council has ordered us to avoid aggression unless absolutely necessary. We don't want to become like the Separatists. Anakin stands behind him as this address is taking place, frustration etched on his face. Master, the Separatists are advancing. If we don't take the initiative now, we'll lose more than just this battle. We can't afford to sit back and wait. Obi-Wan shakes his head, feeling the weight of responsibility and a pang of frustration that Anakin had addressed him this way in front of his own troops. We are Jedi, Anakin. We don't fight for glory. We fight to maintain peace. There's a reason that the Council has this strategy. We must trust their wisdom. Obi-Wan then looks to his young apprentice. And now, we must have this conversation private, Skywalker. Anakin looks back at him. Yes, my master, he says, understanding that he had crossed a line in front of the troops. Even Cody and Rex look at each other with a strange perspective in their eyes. They could tell that something was not right in General Skywalker at this moment, and they could tell that his challenging of Obi-Wan had gone outside of even his normal, unorthodox methods for standing up for what he believed in. As the battle commences, Obi-Wan leads his troops into combat, steadfast in his conviction. Yet, as the clash of lightsabers and blaster fire erupts around him, doubt begins to seep into his mind. The enemy is relentless, exploiting every hesitation of the clones. With each lost soldier, each cry of despair, each cry of the civilians that they were attempting to liberate, he feels guilt gnawing at his core. Later, in the aftermath of the devastating loss, Anakin confronts Obi-Wan, anger blazing in his eyes. We could have won that battle, Master. We were too passive. You followed the Council's orders to the letter, and look what it cost us. We're supposed to protect people, the people of our republic. I'll watch them die because we're afraid of being aggressive. Do you think that General Grievous or Admiral Trench would feel the same way? Obi-Wan clenches his jaw, stung by Anakin's words. However, at least these ones had been in private. We are not soldiers, Anakin. We are guardians, keepers of the peace. The Jedi Code teaches us to act with restraint. The Council's decisions are made for the greater good, even if it means accepting losses. But what about the lives lost? The families left behind? The clone soldiers, who now won't get a chance to see anything after the war? Anakin's voice quivers with emotion. I miss Qui-Gon, and I know he wouldn't have stood by and let this happen. You know that too, Obi-Wan. He defied the Council on multiple occasions when he believed it necessary. Maybe the Code isn't as infallible as you think, and maybe the Council is wrong. As Anakin storms away on the Venator, Obi-Wan's heart aches with the truth in his former Padawan's words. In his mind, Palpatine's voice echoed softly, planting seeds of doubt from a former conversation that he had heard with the young Skywalker in the room. My Jedi friends, why follow orders that cost us more lives? I know that your good friend Qui-Gon understood the will of the Force. He often defied the Council and he believed in something greater. Have you considered that perhaps your loyalty to the Council might have blinded you both to the truth that Qui-Gon would have fought to uphold? Obi-Wan wrestles with these thoughts, caught in a web of duty and the desire to protect. The Clone Wars demanded sacrifices, certainly, but at what cost? Each day he walked the line between loyalty to the Code and the growing sense that it might not hold all of the answers that he desired. As he looks out over the battlefield that he saw on a holographic image in a debrief, witnessing the aftermath of their failure, the heavy armor of duty begins to feel more like a burden than a shield. Maybe, Obi-Wan mutters to himself, staring at that hologram, seeing the devastation on the ground. The path to peace requires more than simple adherence to the Code. In the shadows, Palpatine smiles, knowing that his plan was going exactly how he thought it would. Not only would Anakin be manipulated, but he understands that seeds of doubt were beginning to take root not only in Obi-Wan, but also in other Jedi whom he hoped to convert into Inquisitors once the time was right. The seeds of change had been sown, and soon the fabric of the Jedi Order would be tested and torn apart. The Clone Wars had become a crucible for the Jedi, testing their beliefs and pushing their ideals to the brink. Anakin feels the weight of the galaxy upon him, and with each passing day he finds himself drawn further away from the Jedi Council's teachings and vision for how the war should play out. He began to rely on the guidance of Chancellor Palpatine, who would become a mentor and a father figure in the absence of Qui-Gon Jinn. One evening, as Anakin trains at the temple, on leave from the battles raging across the galaxy, Palpatine's voice echoes in his mind, nurturing his discontent towards the Jedi Council. "Anakin," Palpatine had said during one of their meetings, "the Jedi Council fears your potential." Anakin distinctly remembers this moment as where Palpatine had turned to him with a distinct cup of bantha brew in his hands, the finest in the galaxy. Then he continued to try and weasel his way into Anakin's head, the coffee that Anakin's sipping on, feeling lovely on his tongue. "They see you as a threat, Skywalker. You must not let their limitations dictate your path. You have the potential to protect those that you love, and to revolutionize this war. The Council just doesn't appreciate your talents like I do." With each skirmish, Anakin's confidence grows, but so do his doubts about the Jedi's effectiveness. He's torn, feeling an increasing distance from Obi-Wan, who remains steadfast in his adherence to the code. Anakin watches as his mentor clings to the rules, even in the midst of chaos, leaving him frustrated and wanting to break free from the constraints of the Order. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan feels the tension brewing between him and Anakin. He senses his Padawan's growing boldness and independence on the battlefield, a stark contrast to his own commitment to the Jedi way, despite some of the doubts in his mind. "Anakin, we need to be strategic when we're working together," Obi-Wan insists during a strategy briefing before a major assault. "The Council has reasons for these altars. We must trust their wisdom, even if it leads to difficult choices." Anakin's gaze hardens. "Master, sometimes I wonder if the Council is more concerned with their rules than the lives at stake. What if we had acted differently? What if we'd been more aggressive in our previous offensives? We could have saved lives." The tension in the room is palpable as Anakin and Obi-Wan verbally spar. Obi-Wan feels a knot of worry tighten in his stomach. He'd always believed in the code, but as the war raged on, his private doubts were becoming more and more prevalent in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with it, that his anchor was weighing him down during a storm. Later that evening, while contemplating the day's events, Obi-Wan finds himself drawn to the Senate building as he hopes to clear his mind and get away from some of the vast taskings that the Jedi have for him. While he's not brave enough for politics, he does enjoy wandering the halls sometimes, as it can help him clear his mind. As he walks through the hallways, he encounters Chancellor Palpatine, who had been there for a chance meeting after dark about the war. He had stayed late to hear the details from the Republic Strategy Council. When he sees Obi-Wan, he greets him with a smile. "Ah, Obi-Wan, my friend," Palpatine says. "Please, come into my office. I can tell that something's not right with you." Obi-Wan nods, trusting the Chancellor and entering his office, accepting a cup of his warm bantha brew. "Obi-Wan, my friend," Palpatine says with a knowing smile, handing him his cup. "You bear the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders. It must be difficult being a general. I can see the conflict in your heart. Why else would you come to the Senate building of all places to walk around? It isn't exactly the most interesting of buildings. The Jedi Code is noble, but I believe that it was written for a different time." Obi-Wan frowns, feeling a twinge of unease in his stomach. "The Code is our foundation," he says. "It guides us. We must not stray from it, especially during times of war." Palpatine leans forward, his voice low and persuasive. "But what if the Jedi Code was never meant to handle a galaxy at war? Even historically, during the Old Republic, the Jedi would falter on their beliefs and make concessions based on the conditions of the galaxy. What if you must evolve beyond it to save the Republic? Lives of countless beings hang in the balance." The Chancellor's words hung in the air, casting doubt upon Obi-Wan's steadfast beliefs. He takes a sip of his bantha brew. I appreciate your concern, Chancellor, Obi-Wan replies, though he feels a lingering sense of unease. But I cannot abandon the principles that define us as Jedi. Principles are important, yes, Palpatine continues, but adaptability is also essential during times of crisis, something that the Old Republic Jedi understood very well. Sometimes those who cling too tightly to the past are the ones who falter when the winds of change blow. As Obi-Wan leaves the Chancellor's office, the weight of Palpatine's words settle heavily on his heart. Deep down, he knows that he was facing a critical choice. His commitment to the Jedi Code was unwavering, yet a seed of doubt had been planted and began to grow, whispering that perhaps change was necessary. When Obi-Wan returns to the dimly lit halls of the Jedi Temple, he contemplates the growing distance between him and Anakin. The more that Anakin seeks independence, the more isolated Obi-Wan feels. Is it truly loyalty if it costs us everything? He ponders, grappling with the implications of what Palpatine had said. Little did he know that the path he was treading was not just a personal crisis, but perhaps something that could shift the tides of the galaxy altogether. As the Clone Wars continue to rage on and the Outer Rim sieges begin, the tides of battle shift unpredictably. Obi-Wan finds himself in a constant state of turmoil, trying to balance his Jedi beliefs with what was going on the battlefield. Each new conflict demands more from him, challenging the very principles that he had sworn to uphold. The weight of responsibility presses heavily on his shoulders, and the rigid structures of the Jedi Code feel increasingly constricting. Another element that comes to mind when Obi-Wan thinks about the Jedi Code and what he's feeling is Duchess Satine and his feelings for her. If Obi-Wan were to break his oath, his code, his creed with the Jedi, all of what he had given up with her would have been for nothing. Maybe that was something that was holding Obi-Wan back. The fact that she had died when he could have protected her, all for nothing. During a strategic meeting as the Outer Rim sieges continue to rage on, Obi-Wan stands before a holotable with Anakin across from him, reviewing battle reports that paint a bleak picture for the Republic. The Jedi Council had issued orders for restraint in battle, insisting on diplomatic negotiations with certain worlds, even when lives were at stake. As he relays the message to his troops and to Anakin, who's working with him on this mission, Obi-Wan notices that Anakin's frustration is simmering beneath the surface, especially after his Padawan had recently left the Order. Master, with all due respect, I disagree with these orders. We must strike hard and fast. We can save more lives. Anakin's voice is a mix of frustration and deference to his master, especially after what had happened when he had spoken out of turn last time. We can't let the Council dictate our every move. As generals, we have freedom to do as we wish on the battlefield. We have the power to turn the tide of this war and of these battles. Obi-Wan shakes his head, remembering to adhere to the teachings that he believed crucial to their mission. Anakin, we must follow the Council's orders. Aggression will only lead us to more loss of life, not less. Anakin nods, deferring to his former master out of respect for his beliefs. But as the war escalates and as the battles continue to rage in the Outer Rim, so did the price of adherence to the Code. Obi-Wan finds himself haunted by visions of fallen comrades, the faces of those he had trusted in his leadership now etched into his memory. He witnessed Anakin's unconventional tactics on the battlefield, which had led to a series of victories, winning over troops and allies alike. The young hero's ability to adapt in the face of danger was both impressive and unsettling. One evening, after a particularly devastating loss against the Separatists, Obi-Wan stands alone on the balcony of his quarters, looking out at the war-torn landscape of the planet that they had fought so hard to try and protect. The glow of distant fires mirrors the turmoil within him. He'd followed the code, yet he'd failed to secure a victory. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts as he watches as the Outer Rim sieges continue to devastate the battlefield. Palpatine's words from earlier echo in his mind, and he wonders if following the Jedi Code to the letter makes him a good general, or if it only detracts from his potential to serve in this war and save the Republic. Palpatine's metaphorical shadow falls across his thoughts as he wonders about whether or not he is making the right choice in every battle. And then, his mind wanders to Satine again. If only he could have saved her. Obi-Wan's brow furrows as he wonders about whether he believes in the code. His mind wanders to his apprentice, whose successes continue to give him more and more prevalence on the battlefield. And he wonders about his master Qui-Gon, who had often gone against the Council in order to act for the will of the living force and the greater good of the galaxy. His unorthodox methods had often led Qui-Gon to insight when following the rules wouldn't have, and it made him wise. But as Anakin's successes are recalled in Obi-Wan's mind, and he thinks about his master, a pang of rage shoots through him, and a flicker of jealousy ignites within his soul, something rare for the stoic Jedi Master. Why could he not see the same results as Anakin could on the battlefield? Why was he not gaining the wisdom of Master Qui-Gon? Why was his adherence to the Jedi Code continuing to lead him to despair? Why did he have to watch Maul stab his master and the love of his life? Obi-Wan wonders if his adherence to the code had led him only to frustration and despair rather than the peace that it had promised. The manipulations of Palpatine in his mind are insidious as he turns away, cracks forming in his dedication and loyalty to the creed that he had sworn to adhere to. No, maybe, just maybe, Anakin was onto something. As Obi-Wan continues to pontificate, as he enjoys a bowl of bantha stew before going into battle, he looks at himself in the mirror, hearing the crashing artillery shells of the Outer Rim sieges bombarding his camp. He sees a man that is desperate for victory. He wonders, uncertainty seeping into his mind, what he should do next. When he enters the battlefield, it's littered with the remnants of a fierce clash. Once again, clone bodies and droid bodies littering the ground, and the skies heavy with the musky scent of war. The air hangs thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burnt metal with the droids. Obi-Wan Kenobi stands at the center of the aftermath, his heart heavy with the weight of his recent choices. For the first time in his life, he had chosen to defy the Council in this moment. And then he looks towards Cody. Go towards the goal. Take victory with whatever cost it may be. Let us no longer adhere to the Council's principles. This is war, and we would engage with it as such. Cody looks back at Obi-Wan, slightly surprised by his voice and his strange shift towards similar tactics to Anakin. Are you sure, General? This doesn't seem like you, he says, being up front with Kenobi. Obi-Wan nods. Yes, Cody. Let us go and liberate this world for the Republic. Then he watches as Cody goes and orders his troops to take ground with whatever means necessary. They strike hard with a decisive fist, and the 212th continues to advance forward and forward and forward, even if it sometimes meant sacrificing the lives of certain separatist generals who the Republic wanted captured, or going towards actions that could be seen as controversial, taking towns against the will of the citizens who don't want to be involved in this war, and going further towards their goals. Soon, Obi-Wan sees success from his methods, and he wonders if perhaps this had been the right path all along. Finally, after days of using Kenobi's tactics, the 212th breaks through, and they capture the critical city that they had been intending to catch all along. It's a decisive victory for Obi-Wan and his clones, one that turns the tide of the war against the Separatists in the Outer Rim sieges. But it comes at a heavy moral cost. Civilians had been caught in the crossfire, and some of their homes had been reduced to rubble, their lives shattered. The victory rings hollow in Obi-Wan's ears as he surveys the chaos of the capital, the faces of the innocent haunting him, as he watches his clones forcibly occupy the city. As he walks through the ruins, his mind replays the moment that he had made the choice to strike with force. Palpatine's words echo in his thoughts. Sometimes, to protect the greater good, sacrifices must be made. The implications of those words claw at his conscience. Master Kenobi! One of the soldiers calls, snapping him back to reality. Obi-Wan turns to see one of his troopers rushing towards him, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. We did it, sir! We turned the tide of the war! Yes, Obi-Wan replied, his voice heavy with doubt, but not wanting to break his trooper's spirits. But at what cost? Later, as he returns to the command center, he finds a surprise guest waiting for him. Chancellor Palpatine himself had come to congratulate him on the victory. The Chancellor's eyes gleam with satisfaction, a predator savoring in the taste of his prey. You did well today, Obi-Wan, he says, his voice as smooth as silk. I wanted to come here and congratulate you myself, even though my advisors warned against it. It may have been dangerous, but it was worth it to meet the famed General Kenobi, who won us this battle. You did well today, General, and I'm very proud of your success in the Outer Rim. If only more Jedi could learn to adapt as you have, perhaps more lives could be saved. Your pragmatism is commendable. Obi-Wan meets the Chancellor's gaze, feeling a swell of unease within him. But, Chancellor, civilians were harmed. I never wanted that. Palpatine looks into Obi-Wan's soul, crafting a careful look of empathy. Sadly, that is the price of war, my friend. It's tragic, yes, but unavoidable. I believe you're beginning to understand, as I do, that the Jedi Code is not a shield, but a shackle, binding you to a past that no longer serves the galaxy's needs. Obi-Wan feels a chill run down his spine. Was he truly starting to see the Code as a limitation? As he wrestles with his conflicting emotions, he feels a pang of guilt for his actions. His allegiance to the Jedi was wavering, yet a small part of him still clings to the principles that he lived by for so long. After all, if he abandoned them, what would all of his suffering been for? As the days of the war continue to pass, and as Anakin and Obi-Wan work together on a few more missions, including the Battle of Anaxes, along with saving the Chancellor from Dooku above Coruscant, things continue to simmer over. As the days pass, Anakin talks with the Chancellor more and more, and is appointed to be a member of the Jedi Council under his wishes. However, his growing discontent begins to bubble to the surface as he is not granted the rank of Master, and as Palpatine reveals his true identity as a Sith. The Chancellor had offered him immense power, a power that promised to save Padmé, the woman that he loved. Yet Anakin is torn, sensing the corruption that lay beneath Palpatine's persuasive exterior. After this interaction, rather than go straight to Mace Windu, instead he calls Obi-Wan, who he knows is busy on Utapau, but who he hopes to catch before the conflict bubbles over. Fortunately for Anakin, he does. He catches Obi-Wan as he's traveling to Utapau, and he wants to say to him what he's thinking. Obi-Wan, Anakin confronts his mentor one evening, his voice fraught with tension. Do you trust the Chancellor? Obi-Wan hesitates, recalling Palpatine's praise and subtle manipulation, but also knowing about the Council's secret tasking to Anakin. He has always been a friend to the Jedi, Anakin, but something feels off. While I don't agree with the Council sending you to spy on him, I do think that some of his actions are strange. Anakin's eyes narrows, and suspicion and anger begin to swirl within him. You've changed, Master. You're starting to see what he truly is, aren't you? Obi-Wan's heart sinks. I want to believe in the Code, Anakin. I want to believe that our path is the right one. Yet you chose to break the Code in the Outer Rim sieges, Anakin exclaims, his frustration boiling over. What does that say about us, about our beliefs? Obi-Wan's voice grows soft, filled with uncertainty. I don't know anymore, Anakin. But I do know that I'm starting to feel lost, and even as I go to confront General Grievous, I'm not sure that I'm the right man for this job right now. In the shadows of war, Palpatine senses the fracture between the two of them, feeling Anakin's discontent bubbling over, and seizes the opportunity. As Anakin is going to tell Mace Windu about what is going on in the council chambers, Palpatine goes and finds him before he has a chance to speak with the impressive master. "Ah, Anakin, it's good to see you again. Have you thought more about what I offered you earlier?" he asks, smiling. Anakin looks back at him. "I have," he says. "I'm still not sure." "I see," he says. "Well, it seems to me like both you and your master are growing," he says to Anakin. "You're no longer bound by the small-mindedness of the Jedi Council. You have the potential to be a true leader, one who knows to break the rules for the greater good of the galaxy." In that moment, Anakin feels those words hit him. He wants to resist, to push back against this idea, but the seed of doubt within him, and seeing Obi-Wan also beginning to abandon his principles, begins to push him over the edge. He could see the effectiveness of flexibility on the battlefield, and he could also sense that Palpatine had the answers. "I'm conflicted," Anakin says, looking out over the cityscape as they stand on a balcony that Palpatine had taken him to. "Every decision that I make, it weighs on me. It's the price of war, I suppose." "Embrace it," Palpatine urges, leaning closer to Anakin, his voice low and conspiratorial. "What you feel is growth, a natural evolution of a Jedi. The galaxy is changing, and you must adapt as well." Anakin nods slowly, wrestling with the implications of what Palpatine had suggested. Each victory comes with a reminder of the costs incurred, but each loss also reminds him of the Jedi's limitations. After this interaction, Anakin goes to the Jedi Council and informs them of what's going on. By this time, Obi-Wan is back on Coruscant after having defeated Grievous, and the Jedi Council has become increasingly suspicious of what Palpatine plans. However, Obi-Wan also goes and does not agree with all of the Council's choices, especially when they decide that it's time to go and confront the Chancellor. "Are you sure about this?" Obi-Wan says inquisitively. "I don't know if this is the best course of action. It may turn the public against us. Palpatine is an incredibly powerful and popular leader. We should go through the proper channels before we—" "No," Mace Windu immediately cuts him off. "He has become too powerful. We must confront him." Obi-Wan shakes his head. "I disagree with you, Master. I'm not sure that I—" "Silence," Mace says. "I will go and confront the Chancellor. I can sense the conflict within both you and Skywalker. You will stay at the Jedi Temple, and when I arrive, you will both have gained my trust again." He looks towards Anakin. "Especially you, Skywalker." Then, Mace Windu leaves alongside Sassy Tin, Kit Fisto, Egg and Collar. As Anakin and Obi-Wan sit together in the empty council chambers, their silence is telling. Both of them believe that Mace Windu's actions are wrong, and that the council is corrupt for going back on their word to protect democracy. Instead, they're going to usurp it. Finally, Anakin speaks. "I think we should go see what's up with the Chancellor," he says. "I don't trust Windu. I don't trust the council anymore." Obi-Wan looks at his Padawan. "I'm not sure that I agree." Anakin gives him a sharp glance. "Oh, come on, Master. I know that you do. I know that you are secretly dealing with your frustrations of your own. Come, let us go. Let's see what they're up to, and if they will listen to reason. If not, we may be the ones who are required to save democracy and to bring back our rightful leader." Obi-Wan looks towards Anakin, thinking about everything that Palpatine had told him, thinking about Duchess Satine, thinking about how everything that he stood for could be at risk, and how the Council had just gone and turned their backs on everything that they had preached for years. Obi-Wan nods to Anakin. "All right, Anakin. I agree. Let's go." In that instant, Obi-Wan and Anakin decide to go and see what is going on with the Chancellor, perhaps turning the tides of the galaxy for good. When Obi-Wan and Anakin arrive at the Chancellor's office, they see that he has been defeated by Mace Windu. They watch his shriveled face bat back, lightning onto itself, as Palpatine writhes on the floor, frustrated and complacent to the superior skills of Master Windu, who had used the pod to channel Palpatine's dark side energy against him. Anakin calls out, saying that the man must stand trial for his actions, that this wasn't the Jedi way. Mace Windu looks at both of them. "Ah, Master Kenobi, I expected you to rein the young Skywalker in," he says. I'm too weak," says Palpatine. "The Jedi are taking over. I told you that this day would come," he says, continuing to fire lightning at Windu. Obi-Wan looks towards Mace as well. "You must stop this, Windu. We must let him stand trial and face what the courts have provided for him. This is a coup. This is injustice," Obi-Wan says. "This is against everything that we stand for." Mace Windu looks back at him. "Sometimes sacrifices are needed for the greater good." His words echo the sentiment of Palpatine, and then Anakin realizes that perhaps the Sith and the Jedi weren't so different after all. In that moment, he looks towards Obi-Wan and nods at him, before charging towards Mace Windu, who's about to land the final blow and cutting off his hand. Then Palpatine uses his lightning to push forward against Windu, pushing him out the window as he cries, "Unlimited power!" with all of his might, feeling the dark side course through his veins. As Windu tumbles through the cityscape of Coruscant, Palpatine rises, looking at Obi-Wan and Anakin. Yes, good," he says. "You have done well." Palpatine then looks towards both of them. "Surely now you see that the Jedi are corrupt. Surely now you see that this galaxy needs better direction. We must wipe out all remaining Jedi, as they will be considered traitors against the Republic, including the young initiates at the temple. You have done well serving your Republic." Then Obi-Wan gives Anakin a strange look. Anakin is pledging himself to the teachings of Sidious, giving himself to whatever cause that could help save Padmé. Obi-Wan looks back at Palpatine. "I'm not sure that this is the right way to go. Not all of the Jedi were involved in this plot, Chancellor, I can assure you. I had no knowledge of it." The Chancellor looks back. Mercy is for the weak. Sometimes for the greater good, we must sacrifice our principles." "Indeed," Obi-Wan says. He looks towards Anakin, who is fully devoting himself to the Chancellor, and then he looks towards Sidious, who's basking in his own glory. In that moment, Obi-Wan does something that he never would have considered earlier. He pulls out his lightsaber and slices down the Dark Lord in front of his apprentice, watching as Sidious is in shock as his body collapses to the floor, cut in two. Anakin looks up, enraged at Obi-Wan. "Why did you do that, Master?" he says. "I could have learned. Now Padmé was—" "No, don't you see, Anakin? This man doesn't care about Padmé. He only cares about destroying the Jedi. I sacrificed my principles to kill him because I believe that's the right thing to do. Mace Windu was in the wrong, Palpatine was in the wrong, and now the Republic can get back to some sense of normality," he says. In that moment, Anakin feels the regret of the war washing over him, and he sees reason in his mind's eye. As the Coruscant Guard come up and arrest the two of them for killing the Chancellor and for killing Mace Windu, Anakin and Obi-Wan look towards one another. Maybe, just maybe, if this moment had made the galaxy better, and if they had both violated their principles in order to make it so, then perhaps this was all worth it. The two are put on trial for crimes against the Republic, and they're thrown in prison. However, with Palpatine gone and the war ended, a more pacifist Chancellor replaces Palpatine in the Senate, Padmé Amidala, who survives because there is no manipulation from Palpatine, ends up being elected as Chancellor. She forges a peace agreement with the Separatists, and then she admits her own Chancellor's pardon to both Obi-Wan and Anakin for their valiant efforts to uncover the plots of Sidious to destroy the Jedi. She also formally condemns Master Windu for going against the democratic process and trying to usurp Palpatine without proper procedure. Padmé goes on to become a beloved Chancellor, and Anakin, seeing that his time with the Jedi Order had only sown discontent, decides that it's time to leave. He goes to Naboo to raise the children with Padmé, becoming a father figure to them and teaching them in the ways of the Force while their mother is away on official Chancellor's business. Him and Obi-Wan still visit frequently, and Anakin often invites Ahsoka to come and help train them as well. She becomes an auntie-figure to the young children, and Luke and Leia grow up happily. Obi-Wan continues to serve in the Jedi Order. Again, with Grievous gone, things begin to simmer down, and he decides that he needs to find his way once again. After confronting Master Yoda and telling him that he was starting to doubt the ways of the Jedi, he decides that he wants to be a Wayseeker. He requests that he be allowed to go to the temple on Jedha and train with the Guardians of the Wills, which Obi-Wan permits, because he believes that Obi-Wan would be able to find himself after years of manipulation from Palpatine and frustration boiling in his soul. Obi-Wan thanks him and leaves for Jedha, keeping in contact with Anakin and the council members in order to update them on his journey. Things begin to settle down in the galaxy. Palpatine's manipulation had worked, but not in the way that he had expected it to. Obi-Wan had become the wild card, and, in the end, even though he had violated his principles, and even though Palpatine's manipulation had shown him that sometimes doing things for the greater good could end up being detrimental, Obi-Wan still acted against what the code had said, and slain the rightfully elected Chancellor of the Republic. In this case, though, things worked out, and the galaxy begins to settle down. While Maul continues building his criminal empire in the shadows, the Republic returns to normal, and new enemies rise each day, but the Separatist crisis has been averted,